the nation's capital finally votes. Polling deferred for Jiwaka and Ialibu-Pangia. And bumpy ride for people with special needs at polling stations.
This is National EMTV News with Meriba Tulo.
A very good evening. Thank you for joining us for Friday's news. Enga Provincial Election Manager Anton Yamau says Enga is ready for polling next Tuesday. He said despite a few hiccups between the supporters of candidates and returning officers in a few electorates, polling will still be on. Enga Provincial Police Commander Chief Superintendent George Kakas said the Joint Security Forces are expecting a peaceful election for Enga.
Election Manager Mr. Yamau says electoral officials cannot bow down and listen to candidates and their supporters to defer polling next Tuesday. He said this after being confronted with supporters of candidates from the Kombiam Ambum electorate. The candidates and their supporters have petitioned the electoral office in Wabek to change all the presiding officials and the returning officer and his ARO. They claim the officials were appointed biasly in favor of a particular candidate from the electorate.
Is that if I ask all the candidates to submit names of eligible presiding officers which they got, when they submitted a list, I'm finding them that some of them, their names are already on the list. And this one, I am not allowing the candidates to dictate the electoral commission. Well, electoral commission staff, I as electoral commission staff, I'm facilitating a process here, and I'm not biased, or I'm not doing all the selection one-sidedly.
Meanwhile, PPC George Kakas said the police and the Joint Security Forces are managing the situations proactively on a daily basis. Kakas is expecting a peaceful election after seeing a peaceful campaigning period in Enga.
We've been coming out to the people. We've been conducting a lot of awareness to the people in the districts. I've been ordering my station commanders in all the 5 districts to do their own mini awarenesses in their own districts to tell the people that this election 2017. We Engans must prove to the country and the world that we are a peaceful people. So most often we are always perceived as one of the major hotspots, a volatile province, and that image has to be changed. So my message to my station commanders, my policemen on the ground, was that when you go out, you disseminate to the people that election in Enga must be done peacefully. And so far, we've seen the fruit of our awareness, and I think the people have also matured. The candidates themselves have seen that it's not worthwhile going around being rowdy, creating trouble.
Enga province has been perceived as one of the hotspot areas in the country in terms of tribal fight during the election. However, PPC Kakas would like to calm the voters and the public that this election would be a smooth and peaceful one. Vasinata Yama, National EMTV News, Mount Hagen.
Tomorrow by province, various reactions to polling in Ley City yesterday. While polling was conducted peacefully in some places, others didn't see the same. The common concern raised by the general public was of names not being on the electoral roll.
Good plan, not when some violence or this la me plan vote good strong.
Plenty dolman Mary all no vote this la 2017 common roll all no got name inside the common roll.
Government of the day and also as the electoral commissioners should look into this and try to address it and find a suitable way to address that situation because
time to so lemos na lo mi plano customer vote mi plana. Plenty voters mi plano vote.
As the name the Mr. inside, but because when something come up, all aggressive too much na, mi plan no vote.
Butibam voters are calling for an investigation into the Electoral Commission and the reasons why the electoral roll has unprecedented inaccuracies. About half the number of eligible voters in Butibam did not vote, and those whose names were registered could not vote because ballot papers were short.
By 12 p.m. yesterday, voters were already angry. Polling officers came with a little over 400 ballot papers for a population estimated at 800 plus. Those who could vote stood in line, others, angered by what they viewed as the incompetence of the Electoral Commission, called for an investigation.
We need to call for an investigation. The government ask him, Patilus Gamato, and the line blame, Electoral Commission, come down, looking at our money, working with a foul play. But if there's a foul play in this game, they need to be sacked.
200 ballot papers, that's not enough. There is something wrong within the system now.
Butibam is an Ahi stronghold. The Ahi, as a people, have long held the Lay Open seat. It represents the voice of traditional landowners of Lay City in Parliament. But in this election, many feel they may lose out on this important political representation. Some of the older voters who went to the polls in 2012 and still had their names on the electoral roll couldn't vote because the ballot papers ran short.
My name is on the common roll. I came here, I left my work, thinking that I would vote by 2 o'clock. I was told that there wasn't enough papers for me to vote.
It's not a council.
By 6 p.m., when the ballot papers were exhausted, voters refused to let the polling officers take the boxes. They insisted to get an explanation from the Electoral Commission. Michael Daure, also a Lay Open candidate, vented his frustration at the end of polling.
We're not 200 in this village. We are more than 200. We are more than 5,000.
The situation remained unresolved until late into the night, when eventually the boxes were taken with police escort to the counting centre. Scott Wide, National MTV News, Lay.
And we now join MTV's Lay Bureau Chief Scott Wide in Lay to give us an update on the situation with the Butibam shortage of ballot papers. Scott, a very good evening. What can you tell us more on this situation?
Yeah, good evening, Mariba. This situation has, it happened when people found that they didn't have their names on the electoral roll. So it's as you can imagine, it's a widespread problem all over the city and in the rest of the country. For Butibam in particular, the seat is important for the Ahi who have long held that seat because it represents their political representation and their voice as indigenous landowners of Lay City in Parliament. So that seat is currently held by Lujaya Koza, who was the sitting Lay MP. The electoral officers brought 400 ballot papers to one ward. That was the ward that we went to the polling station. A lot of people complained that the estimated population of that particular ward was about 800 plus. So 400 ballot papers wasn't enough. Some of the voters who had their names on the 2012 electoral roll turned up to vote. They had been at work. They came to the polling booth only to be told that the ballot papers had run out. By 2 o'clock, all the ballot papers had run out, and eligible voters couldn't vote anymore. So that created frustration among the voters. They demanded that the assistant returning officer and the election manager come down to Butibam and explain to them why the ballot papers had run short, why it had been underestimated, the numbers had been underestimated. So it carried on until very late at night. Our crew was there to film the whole process. Just after 8, going towards 9, they were able to convince voters and take the 2 boxes to the counting center at the Sir Ignatius Kilage Stadium.
All right. Now, a situation has also developed at Lay's Nawai block after yesterday's disruption triggered by a shortage of ballot papers again. What is the latest with the situation at Nawai block?
Yes, Mary, but we haven't actually been able to get confirmation from the Electoral Commission here in Lay as to what will happen with the Nawai block situation. Yesterday, our crew was there also. There was a confrontation between community leaders and the polling officials. The polling was eventually suspended, and it's been suspended. It was suspended for the whole day until today. This morning we checked again at Nawai Block. There were no polling stations there. There were also no polling stations at Unitec, where students had burnt ballot papers.
All right. Thank you, Scott. That was Scott Wade, MTV's Lay Bureau Chief, giving us an update on the situation in Morobe. You're watching National MTV News. We'll have more after these messages. Stay tuned. Welcome back to National MTV News. Polling in the Mosby South electorate started without major hiccups this morning. The voting population came out in numbers to cast their votes. International observers were also present at polling sites. Bethany Harriman reports.
In Mosby South, at the Aviat polling site, people lined up peacefully to finally cast their votes. For many, it puts to ease the anxiety and frustrations of Tuesday, when the polling got cancelled.
Election lawyer locally the all two election run good, all no problem trouble run good through smoothly. No.
International observers were at the polling sites. French Ambassador Pascal Maubert was at the Aviat site at Konodobu. In Koki, people lined up in longer lines waiting to place their votes. Voting in the electorate hasn't been disrupted. The only problem persistent is names not on the common roll. Voters aren't happy, but the Electoral Commission has been, for the past 5 years, collecting names.
It's hot outside, but still we keep going. Some we have health problems, just like me, and everything, but still I'm waiting for.
Late this afternoon at Vada Vada, a polling site that was eager to vote on Tuesday. They concluded their polling peacefully this afternoon. It has been a rather interesting day, with some places starting late, while the McGregor Police Barracks polling hasn't happened. MTV also spoke to security personnel who have declined to speak on camera because of their orders, but they've disclosed they haven't been paid full allowances. Some of them have only been paid 50%. It's now 5 p.m. in the afternoon and polling around Port Moresby has concluded. For Mosby South, people have already gone to the polls voting their leaders. Now it's a wait to see who wins the seat. Bethany Harriman, National MTV News.
In this year's election, people with special needs are said to use an express line to cast their votes. In NCD, the Cheshire Disability Service grounds were used to set up a polling booth for those living in the Mosby Northwest electorate. However, like the rest of PNG, things did not go smoothly for them.
They began setting up early, but were not able to start voting until around 11:30 a.m. The reason for the delay? No candidate poster for the open candidates. Ben Tage was the presiding officer today. As chairman of a disability association, it was his intention that specific polling booths for persons with disability were going to be set up in NCD's 3 different electorates.
We are going to only have a polling booth for Mosby Northwest here.
Today, only those living in Northwest were able to vote here. Joyce Kopere, who works at the Cheshire Services, says while express lines are okay, there is the question of accessibility.
The reason is at least they have the freedom to move and the environment is suitable. Comparing to you standing out in the hot sun, there are some polling booths, example like the one across opposite us here. People have to stand. We don't know whether it's accessible for the wheelchairs especially.
Tole Wia, a former teacher, says as a person with disability, he is not a happy taxpayer.
For goodness sake, they are making the election accessible. What about the other aspects of accessibility issues that we people with disabilities in Papua New Guinea face? Other issues like education, buildings, footpaths. Take a look at the 3 overhead bridges in Port Moresby, one in Koki, one over here at Aola, and one at Vision City. For goodness sake, I pay tax. I'm not excluded from paying the GST tax. And I want the money that I pay into tax, I want that money to be used to build public infrastructure that I can have access to.
Today, for those at the Cheshire polling booth, they had access to staff and other resources to make their voting experience less confusing, something Joyce hopes will happen for other electorates as well in the future. Sarah Aupong, National EMTV News.
Prime Minister Peter O'Neill is expected to cast his vote tomorrow in his local village, Kauvo. Mr. O'Neill was supposed to vote today, but due to election materials arriving late in Pangia, he will have to wait until tomorrow. We now cross live to Tekla Gunga in Mendi for more updates. Tekla, thank you for joining us. How have people responded to the deferral of polling?
Well, according to reports we've received, there are no major election-related incidences. Polling is set to commence tomorrow in Ialibu and Pangia. There were some electorates that there were some allergies that polling did. They did polling today. There was one at Ialibu station, but there was a petition that was presented to stop the polling, and yeah, they didn't continue polling.
Now the Prime Minister is there. What has been his reaction to the turn of events today?
The Prime Minister says he is not happy, but he says he understands that there are challenges that the Electoral Commission is facing. He also said that there were funds allocated to the Electoral Commission to use on a weekly basis, and he is asking the Electoral Commission officials to go to the polling venues and try to conduct polling so that polling is conducted in the gazetted dates.
Now, what has security been like on the ground?
There is a very tight security here. We went to Pangia earlier today, but for the Prime Minister to cast his vote, but that did not happen. On our way back, there were about 15 vehicles filled with security personnel and election officials. They escorted the ballot papers and ballot boxes into Pangia. So there's a lot of convoys around in Mendi Town and other parts of Southern Islands. The security is very tight here, and everyone, especially security personnel, they are hoping and aiming to minimize election-related incidences.
All right, thank you for that update, Tekla. That was Tekla Gunga joining us live via Skype from Mendi. Polling for Jiwaka province has been cancelled today and deferred to a later date. Polling will begin according to the urgency in stamping of the ballot papers for the 184 wards. Polling was delayed due to discrepancies with the updated electoral roll given.
People from Jiwaka province woke up early this morning to cast their votes. However, to their dismay, they were told to go home. Polling today was cancelled to a later date because there were issues with the updated electoral roll given by the Electoral Commission. Jiwaka province had to wait till yesterday to get the preliminary roll to go on with the distribution of ballot papers and polling materials.
So we will be having 184 polling teams, and we will be having we will have 5 polling officials per team. So we have a total of 920 polling officials.
So far in the Highlands and other parts of PNG, polling did not go as scheduled by the Electoral Commission. Polling was delayed due to discrepancies with the electoral roll or issues with eligible voters finding their names missing to vote. Provincial Election Manager Rosie Pandiao says stamping of the ballot papers might take time to be completed. Meanwhile, there was heavy security presence today at Barnes Police Station in Jiwaka Province. Provincial Police Commander Chief Superintendent Joseph Tondop assured the public that the presence of security forces is everywhere and polling won't be affected.
And to cover the whole of Jiwaka, I've also looked at the hotspot areas where we feel that there'll be some disturbances because of maybe 1 or 2 candidates are from the same council area or ward. We've got some information intelligence already, so basically the whole of Jiwaka will be covered.
Pangia says polling for Jiwaka province might commence tomorrow and continue to Sunday, or will have one-day polling on Monday. This all depends on the stamping of the ballot papers for security measures. Basenata Yama, National EMTV News, Mount Hagen.
While NCD voted today, residents of McGregor Barracks at 9 Mile outside of Port Moresby did not poll. Many turned up this morning expecting to vote, but electoral officials did not arrive at the polling site to organize polling. They said for the past elections they have voted at McGregor Barracks Ward 91, but that has now been moved to New Erima. This has frustrated voters as they have been waiting all day. They're calling on the Electoral Commission to address this issue immediately so that they can still vote.
We've been waiting for our polling station has been vacant. There's no polling officers since this morning 8 o'clock up until now. It's now I think about 3 going to 4. And we question the reason why. Is there a genuine reason why we don't vote today? And you know, there is about 900 plus voters here at McGregor, and our comment roll was updated. We're eligible to vote for this year. And as far as we are concerned, our booth number is 91, but we have seen lately that 91 is now assigned to another station, polling area. So that raises the question again. So what happens to us here at McGregor? Most of us here at McGregor, the wives and the children, our husbands and our children's fathers will be the very next people that the government will be looking for security. And we deserve the right to vote.
Mibla camp lo morning 6 o'clock yet lo mibla expect him lo mama lo casting votes. Polling officials failed to turn up. Failure staff lo said mibla no failure. Electoral Commission failure mibla lo choose him leaders lo mibla. Or much been prophesized talk along. One man married by the rights lo casting votes lo outside leader lo next 5 years. Dila molia da jegim only failure mibla. Now Mibla staff also. Still time finished. All the police stations closed, but Mibla still wait yet. But suppose possible Mibla can vote 6 o'clock night too. No assembly. Security is guaranteed. Member staff. Yeah. Thank you.
And now a look at the finance news. The kina closed unchanged at $0.3145 in the interbank market. At Bank South Pacific, your kina was buying $0.307 $0.3965 Australian dollars, $0.2652 euro, and 34.06 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold, coffee, and copper closed higher, while cocoa closed the day lower. Crude oil, palm oil, and copper all closed the day higher. And on the stock markets, the Dow Jones closed 167 points lower, the ASX closed 84 points lower, and the All Ordinaries closed 79 points lower. Here with Friday's news, stories making headlines overseas. After these messages, stay tuned. Welcome back to National EMTV News. Turning overseas now, the White House has defended President Trump's Twitter tyrant against an American female TV host that sparked backlash from both Democrats and Republicans.
Donald Trump being presidential, welcoming the president of South Korea to the White House. But earlier today, Donald Trump being anything but presidential, launching a harsh personal attack on MSNBC television host Mika Brzezinski, calling her low IQ crazy Mika, saying she and co-host and fiance Joe Scarborough came to visit him in Mar-a-Lago in December and, quote, she was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. The Twitter outburst came after Brzezinski criticized the president on her show this morning.
Nothing makes a man feel better than making a fake cover of a magazine about himself, lying every day and destroying the country.
The president's tweets touched off an avalanche of bipartisan condemnation.
I think it's so blatantly sexist, I don't even know that there's a question about it.
Look, what we're trying to do around here is
improve the tone and the civility of the debate, and this obviously doesn't help do that.
The White House press briefing was almost entirely consumed with questions about the president's tweets.
The president has been attacked mercilessly on personal accounts by members on that program. I don't think that it's a surprise to anybody that he fights fire with fire.
The episode would seem to put First Lady Melania Trump in an awkward position. Before the election, she had said that she would make combating cyberbullying a cause as First Lady.
About social media in this 21st century, what's going on, it's very hurtful to children, to some adults as well.
Australia's highest-ranking Catholic priest, who was the Vatican's number 3, will return home to a Melbourne court next month. Cardinal George Pell has been granted a leave of absence from the Pope to fight stark sexual assault charges.
A public holiday for the people, and for Pope Francis, an opportunity to celebrate Mass with several new cardinals. But one of his most trusted officials, effectively the head of the Vatican's vast property portfolio and finances, was not administering the sacraments, but facing the press after becoming the highest-ranking Vatican official to be charged with child sexual abuse. The alleged offences relate to an ongoing inquiry back in Cardinal Pell's native Australia into instances of historical child sexual abuse.
I'm innocent of these charges. They are false. The whole idea of sexual abuse is abhorrent to me.
Cardinal Pell had been Archbishop of Melbourne during the 1990s, where hundreds of individuals claimed to have been abused by priests. He was interviewed by the inquiry last year via video link. Several survivors travelled from Melbourne to witness his testimony. Pope Francis has prioritised the issue of child sexual abuse, setting up a commission for the protection of children. But one member, who resigned earlier this year, says the institution itself is reluctant to change.
There's this feeling that why should we change? There's no need to change. This will all pass. And that attitude of complacency has to go.
In his homily today, Pope Francis asked his hearers if they were people who just talk about their faith but do not display the marks of godliness in their daily lives. A question that Cardinal Pell will have to answer in court next month.
Iraqi forces are locked in an intense battle for the final few blocks of western Mosul, still under ISIS control. The troops have captured the ruined Great Mosque Al-Nuri in Mosul's old city, marking a major stride in the 8-month battle to seize the city from the terrorist group.
Covering fire as troops dart into position. We join them, pushing forward but keeping low. There's an IS sniper ahead. But they managed to press on across the rubble of a hospital complex. Treacherous terrain, closing in on the last remaining IS fighters. This was their main base in Mosul. Well, this is the final push forward against the so-called Islamic State. It's a grueling advance here in the heat and the dust. This battle has dragged on for more than 8 months. We've just been told that 3 IS fighters have fled from the building right in front of us. But it's clear that most of the militants who remain here will fight to the finish. But so will the troops, who are determined to bury the Islamic State where it was born, in Mosul.
We lost many martyrs here, all of them young. I miss them. Their families miss them. And the country misses them. But they didn't die for nothing. They died for this country.
And today, another fallen soldier carried from the battlefield after troops reached what's left of the Al-Nuri Mosque, a 12th century treasure. It was here the IS leader proclaimed himself ruler of all Muslims. IS blew up the mosque last week. Mosul is emerging from the shadows after 3 long years of tyranny. The caliphate now lies in ruins where it was declared, but the IS ideology has long since spread from here, bringing anguish to cities including London and Manchester. In this battle of our times, there are many front lines.
This is National EMTV News. We'll have Trukai Sports for you up next. Stay tuned.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome to Trukai Sports. Relly Kaputin and Edrin Monagi both won gold medals in the women's high jump and heptathlon final today in Suva. In the senior women's 800-meter final, it saw a close encounter between Australia and Papua New Guinea, with PNG's Poro Gahekave settling for bronze. It was an all-Aussie PNG affair again in the senior men's 800-meter final, which saw Australia topping the podium, with PNG's Martin Orovot taking out silver. Robinson Yinambe continues to score points as he heads into the senior men's decathlon final tomorrow after an impressive 400-meter race today. Day 4 of the Oceania Track and Field Championships concludes tomorrow. The PNG boxing team arrived in the country after attending the Oceania National Boxing Championships on the Gold Coast, Australia. Out of 9 countries, Papua New Guinea finished in 3rd place, just behind Australia and New Zealand.
PNG did well at the Oceania Championships with 5 out of 6 boxers receiving medals. The most noticeable would be Charlie Keama, who defended his title in the flyweight division, beating Australia's Tyler Blizzard in the gold medal bout. Maxi Mangia settled for silver in his light flyweight division, going down to Australia's Alex Winwood.
This has put us to a ranking, especially for the gold. Charlie Keama is now #1 in the Oceania. And Maxi Magia is #2 because he got silver. And both of them have now qualified for the World Championship in August. That will be in Germany.
Team PNG was made up of some fairly new faces to the international scene. PNG Boxing President John Avira says, though they were new, they certainly impressed going up against Australia and New Zealand.
We have achieved a very good result. And we are very happy for the team. With 1 gold medal, 1 silver, and then 3 bronze.
Moving forward, boxers will be preparing to take part in the national championships and other upcoming international events.
This is the cream of the team that we will be looking at, but that's not to say that they are selected. We've got a fair bit of time. They need to do the right thing. The selection criteria still applies to everyone before we can, send them to those events.
Elijah Levet, National EMTV Sports.
Pacific Sprint Queen and PNG's very own Toya Whistle has done it again. She bagged gold last night in the 100-meter senior women's final of the 2017 Oceania Athletics Championships in Fiji. The 29-year-old clocked in a time of 11.63 seconds ahead of Australia's Jessica Pearce and Morgan Gaffney. But the high-achieving Sprint Queen was disappointed with her timing, as her personal best is 11.29. Her training for upcoming events will continue as soon as she returns to Australia. We'll have more of Trukai Sports after these messages. Don't go away.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome back to Trukai Sports. Youth Commonwealth Games PNG shifter mission Michael Henau says final preparations for Team PNG are on track. Henau will also be in charge of the Asian Indoor and Mixed Martial Arts Games in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. Godwin Eki reports.
As Team PNG athletes prepare for 2 big international events, the first in July, the Youth Commonwealth Games, followed by the Asian Indoor and Mixed Martial Arts in Ashgabat in September, Team PNG is hoping to increase their medal count since the 2015 Samoan Youth Commonwealth Games. 5 male and 3 female will represent PNG at the Youth Commonwealth Games in swimming, tennis, athletics and beach volleyball. These athletes are in training in both PNG and overseas. Chef de mission Michael Henau says the level of competition will be high, and Team PNG has been working hard at preparing both its athletes and officials.
So the Commonwealth Youth Games will be held in the Bahamas in July, and we're sending a small contingent, but it's a contingent that we're confident will represent the country well. It's one that we know have been preparing well both on and off the field of play.
The Youth Commonwealth Games contingent will be made up of 8 athletes and 8 officials.
In terms of preparations, we can say that We're confident that each of the individual athletes have been preparing quite well. So each of the athletes and officials that we're sending as part of Team PNG to the Commonwealth Youth Games, we're confident have been selected on merit and will represent the country well.
While the Youth Commonwealth Games focus is on the young athletes, PNG is honoured to have been invited to this year's Asian Indoor and Mixed Martial Arts Games for the first time. Taking lead as chef de mission, Hanau says both events will be used as pathways to next year's Commonwealth Games. Hanau says he is looking forward to leading PNG to a new international event. PNG will compete in swimming and weightlifting with more than 15 athletes expected to participate from September 15th to the 24th in the desert city of Ashgabat in Turkmenistan.
Our expectations for Team PNG, both for the Commonwealth Youth Games and the Asian Indoor Martial Arts Games in September, is that each of the athletes and officials just has a good time. Our approaching both of these two games as an opportunity to build the capacity of the sport administrators who are travelling with us as officials, and also to build the games experience for each of the athletes.
Hanau is hoping to get the best results at the end, making sure that these athletes not only have fun but play hard for the country. Godwin Eki, National, EMTV Sports.
In the FIFA Confederations Cup, Germany's Leon Goretzka scored 2 expertly taken goals in the opening 8 minutes to set his side on the way to a 4-1 win over Mexico. Mexico were confident of defeating Germany, but the world champions displayed too much class in the semi-finals.
Timo Werner added the third just before the hour, as Germany's young experimental team took advantage of the wide open spaces in the Mexican defense and punished them with ruthless finishing. Mexico's Marco Fabian pulled a goal back with a spectacular swerving strike in the 89th minute. But Amin Younes hit a fourth for Germany during stoppage time in an end-to-end game. Mexico had a lot of possession but failed to take their chances and always looked vulnerable at the back. Germany, whose starting team had an average age of just under 24, will meet South American champions Chile in Sunday's final in St. Petersburg in Russia. Jeremy Moggy, National TV Sports.
And that's a wrap for True Guy Sports. We'll have the weather details for the next 24 hours after these messages.
True Guy Sports. True Guy Sports.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux.
A look at the weather forecast for Saturday. Port Moresby, Daru, Kerma and Alotau. Some thundery showers in store. Cloudy weather and windy weather in Popondetta. To the Momase region, thundery showers in Ley and Wau. A few showers expected for Madang, mostly fine for Wewak and Vanemore. In the New Guinea Islands region, a shower or two for Lorengau and Kavieng, thundery showers for Kokopo, Rabaul, Kimbe and Buka. And in the Highlands region, Mount Hagen, Goroka, Kundiawa, Mendi and Wabeg, all these major centres can expect some thundery showers over the next 24 hours.
Are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux.
And that's the news, sports and weather for today, Friday the 30th of June 2017. On behalf of the EMTV News team, have a safe weekend. Good night.